I'm John Brill. I give you consent to videotape me and use this video for your class or whatever you need to use it for.
Could you give a brief description of your job and occupation?
So my name is John Brill. I started a farm in 2007, which is called the Farm at Our House. I'm an owner of the farm, so I'm an organic farmer. I produce vegetables and fruits on a farm in Olney, Maryland. We produce on 4 acres. We have 12 acres available to produce, but we produce on 4 acres.
All right, could you give us a brief description of what you think organic means?
So let's see. To me, organic means produced using natural inputs without using chemicals that are processed or dangerous. It also means working with the Earth's natural cycles and natural capacity to provide nutrients needed for producing food and processed foods. It's pretty good. Let me think if there's anything else. Okay, yeah. To me, organic also means not using chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides, and chemical herbicides.
Okay, so does eating organic food benefit?
There's one other thing about it. Organic also means to me using inputs that are from nature in a cyclical way, so that you are minimizing the materials that you need to take from off-site into your production facility. Go ahead. Your farm.
Does eating organic food benefit your health?
I believe eating organic food benefits your health, in part because you can be sure there aren't chemicals and other processed ingredients in the foods that may be harmful to your body. There's a lot we don't know about nutrition yet. We do know that eating healthy foods that are organically or sustainably grown is good for our bodies if you eat a balanced diet.
So what are some farming techniques that you use for organics that you don't use for non-organics?
So, let's see.
Like, how do you keep the insects away if you don't use
Okay, right.
pesticides?
Okay, so we use various methods to ensure that the crops we produce are healthy and survive and thrive. What's that? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, sorry. I'm going to silence my phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
mine's off actually, but hey, you can do what you need to do. Is it still running? It's running. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for insects, there are various things that we can do as organic farmers to reduce the likelihood that insects will damage the plants. We can cover them with a material called row cover, which is a physical way of blocking insects from getting in to the plants. The row cover is held up by some hoops and in a long row, usually along the row of plants. We can use varieties that are resistant to insects and that are less likely to be damaged because the insects either don't like them as much or they can resist. Even if they get eaten a little bit, they can still survive. And we time our plantings of crops that the insects like to eat in a way as best we can to avoid the times when the insects are at their biggest populations. Those are some of the things we do. We also, by reducing weeds around the plants and allowing plants to grow that attract the insects in other areas, the insects are less likely to come in and use those other plants that are as kind of a home base to then invade the crops, and they will stay, ideally they will stay with the plants that are not on the farm. Also, there are some natural substances we can use to actually control and kill pests too. And these are substances that break down and are generally harmless to the environment and are allowed under the organic laws. So that's for insects. Is that what your question about insects?
Well, just in general.
Right. Okay. So for weeds, we do a lot of physical cultivation of weeds, which is actually like using tools to cut them down without hurting the crops. You can flame weeds using the flamer, and if you catch the weeds when they're really small, it makes the job a lot easier as the crops grow. There's less of a chance for the weeds to grow; they get shaded out. So those are the main ways we control weeds. In some cases, we just allow a few more weeds to grow too, depending on what the crop is, because they're not always harmful to the crops.
And does using these techniques, does that help the environment in any way instead of using pesticides and whatnot?
So let me think. There's a third thing, right? Weeds. We said pesticides, herbicides. Oh, okay. That's not really for. Oh yeah. So, in terms of nutrients for the plants, we use a lot of organic matter, like leaf compost, manure from local horses or cows. We can buy composted manure. We compost on our facility. And when you add compost to the soil, that increases the organic matter in the soil, which helps the plants grow, as opposed to using a industrial-based fertilizer that's petroleum-based. So those are the three main areas.
Yeah, and does this help the environment?
So I believe that farming organically helps the environment immensely. It reduces the amount of pollution that goes into the watershed through. Am I still in? Okay. So by farming organically, we reduce the amounts of nutrients that goes into the watershed. And if you have too many nutrients going into the water, like nitrogen, phosphorus, you have problems with algae blooms and other issues, with imbalances in the water quality. As far as the land itself, industrial farming basically, the idea behind industrial farming is to basically kill life in the soil and then add fertilizer to industrial-based fertilizer. So we, as organic farmers, don't believe that's healthy for the earth. The soil is actually kind of a living ecosystem, really, with all kinds of things happening. And we use, rather than killing that off, we use that to help the plants grow. By not using petroleum-based fertilizers, we reduce the amount of petroleum that's taken out of the earth, which is also good for the environment. And we do a lot of, in small-scale organic farming, we do a lot by hand. So we use less gas-powered tools, for example, so we don't pollute as much.
So what are some disadvantages to growing organic foods?
Under the current, I guess, it's a kind of a hard question to answer, but as it is now, given the subsidies for farms, hey.
Oh, good. I didn't want to interrupt anything.
It's okay. I can start again.
Sorry, did I interrupt?
It's only been 20 minutes. I'll do it over again. No, you're fine. We're fine.
Anyway.
Disadvantage. So I think under the current price structures and subsidies, generally it's a little bit more expensive to farm organically, especially at a small scale. Industrial farming is cheaper because we have industrial fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides. And as you grow to a bigger farm, it's still a little more cost effective, I think. But as you do get bigger, the organic farming seems to be more on par in terms of costs. But also, like I said, there's subsidies that the government gives, which helps industrial farms. And there are also some regulations that make it harder for small organic and sustainable farms to be viable. In terms of, there's various different regulations in place that make it challenging to do it cost effectively.
And are they more expensive as well when you're purchasing?
Typically, organic produce is a little bit more expensive than the tradition, what we call conventionally grown, which I call industrial farmed produce, which isn't always necessarily bad, but typically organic produce costs probably 15 to 20% more at the farmer's market or at the grocery store, but not always.
And why?
I think for two reasons. The main reason is as I mentioned, the cost of production is higher to produce the organic foods and the raw produce. Also, I believe that people are willing to pay a premium for it because people who want organic foods are willing to pay a premium for it because they really want what they perceive as a healthier food for themselves, and that's better for the earth.
So, what companies are the biggest buyers of organics?
Wow. Companies?
Is it like grocery stores? Well, obviously.
Those restaurants. So you mean in terms of businesses, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it depends on. I don't know the answer to the question. There are some employers that probably who have cafeterias that focus on health or the environment. I'm sure who purchase more organics. Obviously, there are some organic grocery stores like Roots, or healthy grocery stores like Roots and Whole Foods that buy more organics. The co-op, Como Park Silver Spring Co-op buys organics, and a lot of customers buy organics directly from the farms as well. Residents. These aren't businesses, but end users, the eaters, buy directly from farm stands and from farmers markets and through different kinds of marketing methods, models. One's called community supported agriculture, in which the farm is supported by the surrounding community. People buy shares in the farm at the beginning of the season, and they get a share of produce usually each week over the growing season.
And is that why?
Also, there are some restaurants that buy local and organic produce. Restaurants that have a mission to use, to support the local economy, support local farmers, and provide what they see as healthier food for people in the earth too. So. Yeah.
And is that the reason? Like, I know my mom's always saying that Whole Foods is so expensive, and some of that because the food is organic and versus the other stores which may have like non-organic food.
Well, I think, unfortunately, organic has become kind of a niche market for folks who are more well-to-do in our society, which is very unfortunate because everyone should have access to healthy food that's good for the environment, that's produced in a manner that's good for the environment. So I do believe that part of that is there's been a niche created, and part of it also is that there are costs involved because you have to meet certain regulations when you produce organically. Even if it's produced overseas, it still has to meet certain regulations, and so for those two reasons, I think it's cost more.
Is there like a different type of land that you need to grow organics, like more qualities that you would need for specific land types or climate?
Typically, organic farms are interspersed with non-organic farms. So pretty much wherever you can grow food, you have soil that's good for growing food, industrially or conventionally, you can typically grow organically. It does help to have a good soil to start with. In some cases, it's probably, I suppose it's easier to grow without, it's easier to grow conventionally or industrially on soils that aren't good because you can add fertilizers to them, whereas it takes a little more to get soil to get to the point where it can be productive organically. It takes a little more time and effort.
And do you need more people like on an organic farm because you need more like manpower?
Actually, that's a good question. Organic farming can be just as, let's see how you say it. You can mechanize an organic farm the same way you mechanize an industrial farm. So typically, maybe a little bit more, but I think if you use machinery, the same kinds of machinery, you probably don't need a whole lot more manpower.
But like, if you use machines, does the gas like coming out of them, does that affect the plants in any way?
Typically, no. I think you don't. Typically, when you're so machinery used in farming is not typically used all the time. Just for, like, let's say preparing the soil, planting the crops, and in between the time, there's usually a large span of time between one use of a what's the word, gas-powered tool or vehicle, and the next time you use it in the field. It could be weeks or months sometimes in between.
So, when and why did you decide to become an organic farmer?
So in the fall of 2007, I was